have a quizzy quiz today as well. Every 5 chapters in Redfern, we hit a quiz. So we're going to get started reading. I don't know where Lucas is, but hopefully he catches up. Real quickly, though, before we start reading chapter 15, I want to say a word and see how much you guys remember about this concept. Foreshadowing. Who remembers or knows what is foreshadowing, or have you heard that before? Is this new?
Maybe like forging something?
Not forging something, but I like how you used a part of the word and tried to like pull in something that you knew. Good try. Oh my gosh, it's something new. All right, never mind. We are learning today. Rewind, okay? Without all the chat. Okay. Foreshadowing is something that an author does to kind of give you, like, have you ever been reading and you kind of have the feeling like, oh, something bad's going to happen?
Yeah.
Or like you're watching a movie and you're like, oh no, you just get that kind of feeling like something terrible is going to be eventually happening. Like somebody says something or something happens and you're like, that's not going to work out well for them.
Yeah,
Right.
it's bad. There's this horror movie I was watching
A horror movie
called Lights Out, and I was like, in the beginning, I was like, okay, it's gonna be a jump scare. It's gonna be a jump scare, and then it took so long for the jump scare. I was like, okay, maybe not. And as soon as I relaxed, I was like, holy crap! And as soon as I relaxed, it happened.
Yep. Sam.
Foreshadowing? Yeah. It's like when you know something's bad is gonna happen. It's like when you hear like the Democrats talk.
Real into this.
Oh, Sam is just randomly bringing politics in for no reason. Zeke, do you have anything like beneficial to add?
Yeah, so like you know in movies sometimes like you can't do this in books, but in movies like sometimes like the music gives away that.
Okay, yeah, sometimes the music kind of gives away a clue if you're watching a movie that doesn't necessarily happen in a book. But foreshadowing sometimes usually appears either at like the beginning of a book or the beginning of a chapter, and it kind of just gives you that feeling like something's kind of off a little bit. Like, you know, so you might not know what's coming, but you know something's coming. Like, think back to the chapter where little Ann got stuck in the river. It had said it was so cold and and the dad had said there's ice down under the snow. There's like packed ice down under the snow. Be careful tonight. Like, dad had given him a lot of warnings that it was bad weather. And then do what?
I always know that something bad to happen when we're going on.
Yeah. So if you think back to the beginning of that chapter when dad was giving him all the warnings about the snow and the ice and the bad weather, if we'd have thought about it, that might have been a little bit of foreshadowing, letting us know, ooh, it is bad weather and he's going hunting anyway. Something bad might happen because of this bad weather, right? So today as we're reading, I want you to be thinking about or looking for any clues that something might just not be right. Hello. What would help if I just click save? Because I have it right here on my screen. Okay, it's done. Okay. All right, bye. All right, sorry, I'm back. I did not click save on our lunch count. Okay, and I'm done. All right, so we're going to keep an eye out for maybe any other conflict that might be a foreshadowing of something else that's going to happen. Maybe things that aren't exactly what they seem they might be. Any unusual details. You're like, why would the author mention that? That's kind of random. Usually if there's like this just random detail in there, you're like, oh, that's going to be important later. Why would they tell us that now? That doesn't make any sense. Must need that information later. So we're going to kind of just keep our eyes and ears open as we go through the chapter today, because I don't know if you guys noticed, there's only about like 5 chapters left. We're going to finish this up. I believe there's 20 chapters in this.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've got 5 more chapters, and then we're all done. And I think you guys are gonna just love it from here on out. Josie's scared. Yeah. So when we left off You guys remember when we left off? There was going to be a coonhound hunting tournament, a coon hunting tournament, and Billy and Grandpa and Dad loaded up the buggy and the hounds, and they were heading off to go to the tournament.
Some foreshadowing. I remember some foreshadowing.
You remember some foreshadowing already. Hit me with it.
Gun shy. Remember they were talking about how she's gun shy?
Oh, they were randomly telling us that little Ann was afraid of being gun shy. Okay, so that might be a clue randomly that something, all right. Her being afraid of guns, do we think that might be significant when she gets to
Very.
I'm thinking
the hunt?
all the hunters are going to have guns, and then they're going to
Okay.
try to fire at those humans. Little Ann needs to help Big Dan, but yet she's not going to be able to because she's going to be going and hiding in a bush.
Okay, all right, let's see what happens. Chapter 15, here we go. Over a dim, rocky road in a northeasterly direction, our buggy moved on. I noticed that the road stayed at the edge of the foothills, but always in sight of the river. About the middle of the afternoon, we stopped at a small stream to water the team. Papa asked Grandpa if he intended to go all the way to the campground before stopping. No, he said, I figure we'll put up for the night when we reach Bluebird Creek. With a good early start in the morning, we can make the campgrounds in plenty of time to pitch our tent and set up camp. Late that evening, we reached Bluebird Creek. We didn't set up our tent. With a tarp, we made a lean-to and built a large fire out in front of it. While Grandpa fed and watered the team, Papa and I carried our bedding to the shelter and made down our beds. Grandpa said, while we're cooking supper, you see to your dogs, feed them and fix them a warm bed. I figured to cook them some cornmeal mush, I said. That's what they're used to eating. Mush, Grandpa growled. They're not going to have mush, not if I can help it. What is mush?
Like pig stuff.
Like a pasty kind of thing? Is that what you said?
Prison food.
Okay. He said it's cornmeal mush.
It's kind of like just something grinded down to oatmeal.
Yeah, okay, so Sean says oatmeal. Kane's saying something kind of ground down. They're both kind of right. Like they're going to grind. He's
Grinded oatmeal, which is like mixed with some water and like give it.
Yeah, you just grind down some grains and you mix it with water and it's Kendall's making a terrible face. Yeah, it wouldn't be very good. So
So it's like oatmeal without the oats, like the oats are still
Okay.
also.
there is Shawnee poo. There's so much talking happening. Okay. All right, so mush. Grandpa don't want him to eat mush. He wants him to eat something better.
Oh,
He came back and handed me 2 large cans of corned beef hash, saying, here, reckon I'll eat this. I wanted to hug my old grandpa's neck. Sure, Grandpa, I said, they'll love that. Opening one of the cans, I dumped it out on a piece of bark in front of old Dan. He sniffed at it and refused to eat. I laughed, for all I knew why. While I was opening the other can, Grandpa came over. What's the matter, he asked. Won't he eat it? Sure, Grandpa, I said, he'll eat, but not before little Ann gets her share. With the second can opened, I fed her on another piece of bark. Both of them started eating at the same time. With an astonished look on his face, Grandpa exclaimed, well, I'll be darned. I never saw anything like that. Why, I never saw a hound that wouldn't eat. Did you train them to do that? Gray.
so little Ann, Big Dan, old Dan won't eat without little Ann.
He won't eat without little Ann, right?
So that makes me think of a little bit of foreshadowing.
Okay, what's going to happen?
Because I feel like maybe later on in the book, it's going to be like little Ann's going to get gun shy, someone's going to shoot, then she's going to run away, and then he's going to feed old Dan, hoping little Ann's okay out there, and then he won't eat.
All right. Grayson said he's feeling a bit of foreshadowing right here, that the fact that old Dan won't eat without little Ann, something's going to happen to little Ann, and then old Dan's not going to
Or old
eat.
Dan is gonna go with her, and then they're gonna lose.
Okay. All right. Okay.
It's always been shown in the book that old Dan cares about little Ann this whole entire book. So something is leading up on to something in here.
All right. Kane said this entire book they have been talking about the relationship between old Dan and little Ann being so tight and not doing nothing without each other. And he says this whole book is leading up to something.
And I think I know what that something is. Little Ann dies, old Dan gets the present. Doesn't eat because he can't eat without little Ann. And then old Dan dies. But that would just be a terrible ending.
Yeah.
Kane says that would be a terrible ending. That must not be it. Okay. All right, guys. Class. Focus. Okay. Did you train them to do that? No, Grandpa, I said. They've always been that way. They won't take anything away from each other, and everything they do it as one. Papa had overheard our conversation. He said, you think that's strange? You should have seen what I saw one day. One of the girls threw 2 cold biscuits out in the backyard to old Dan. He stood and looked at them for a bit, then picking both of them up in his mouth, he trotted around the house. I followed just to see what he was going to do. He walked up in front of the doghouse, laid them down, and growled. Not like he was mad. It was a strange kind of growl. Little Ann came out of the doghouse, and each of them ate a biscuit. Now, I saw this with my own eyes. Believe me, those dogs are close to each other. Real close. After Papa had stopped talking, silence settled over the camp. Grandpa stood staring at my dogs. In a slow voice, as if he were picking his words, he said, you know, I've always felt like there was something strange about those dogs. I don't know just what it is, and I can't exactly put my finger on it, yet I can feel it. Maybe it's just my imagination. I don't rightly know. Turning to my father, he said, did you ever notice the way they watch this boy? They see every move he makes. Papa said, yes, I've noticed a lot of things they've done. In fact, I could tell you of a few that you would never believe. But right now, here's something you had better believe. Supper's ready. While I was helping myself to hot Dutch oven cornbread, fried potatoes, and fresh side meat, Grandpa poured the coffee. Instead of the 2 cups I expected to see, he set out 3 and filled them to the brim with the strong black liquid. I had never been allowed to drink coffee at home and didn't exactly know what to do. I glanced at Papa. He seemed too busy with his eating to pay attention to me. Taking the bull by the horns, I reached over and ran my finger through the cup's handle. I held my breath as I walked over and sat down by a post oak stump. Nothing was said. Grandpa and Papa paid no attention to what I did. My head swelled up as big as a number 4 wash tub. I thought, I'm not only big enough to help Papa with the farm, now I'm big enough to drink coffee. With supper over and the dishes washed, Grandpa said, well, we had better turn in as I want to get an early start in the morning. Pause there. Fiona.
I think I see a little bit of foreshadowing.
Okay.
So I think that like he's saying that he's like never ever been allowed to, and maybe like at the end of the book he's gonna come back home and he's gonna ask his mom to get coffee, and her mom's like, where did you ever think of that idea?
Well, I had it on the way to the hound fire thing.
All right. Possibly.
Yeah, and then she's gonna be like, Grandpa?
Yep, they're saying that Mama's going to wonder, he might come home and ask for more coffee, and Mama's going to wonder where on earth he got the idea to be allowed to have coffee. Josie, do you raise your hand?
I didn't know what they said.
Oh, okay. There you go. Okay. With supper over and the dishes washed, Grandpa said, well, we'd better turn in as I want to get an early start in the morning. Long after Grandpa and Pop had fallen asleep, I lay thinking of the big hunt. My thoughts were interrupted when the wonders of nightlife began to stir in the silence around us. From a ridge on our right, a red fox started barking. He was curious and, in a small way, challenging the intruders that had dared to stop in this wild domain. From far back in the flinty hills, lost my stomach.
Well, don't forget the computer.
The monotonous call of a hoot owl floated down in the silent night. It was the mating call and was answered from a distant mountain. Monotonous. What does monotonous mean? Fiona, what do you think it means?
I'm thinking because like it's the way that it sounds. I'm thinking kind of like rambunctious, like really really loud, and like an owl. Because sometimes like owls can get kind of annoying.
Okay, she says it's kind of like a rowdy, rambunctious, annoying sound.
Or some of those birds that you have in your yard or your neighbor's yard that are always, like if you're going home from the bus, you just hear annoying, very annoying birds just keep on chattering and chattering.
Okay, you're kind of on the right track now. Annoying, keep on chattering. You're on the right track. Kendall, what do you think?
I think it's a coyote chatting with another coyote and probably trying to catch an animal.
Well, it says it's an owl. It's not a coyote. The monotonous call of a hoot owl. Kane.
Speaking of chattering. There's a lot of chattering going on in here.
Speaking of chattering, you bet it is a lot of monotonous chattering
Now
in
we're
here.
chattering about
So let's
chattering.
look up monotonous and see what the dictionary says.
Is this a vocab word?
It is repetitious, lacking in variety and interest, dull,
Repeated.
tedious. Repeated is the thing. So in this circumstance, the monotonous means it's just happening over and over. It's the same call over and over. Nothing interesting, nothing exciting. Who, 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 who. It doesn't get loud. It doesn't get soft. It doesn't get excited. It's just a boring, over and over, repeating, dull sound. Who,
Can you shut up?
who, who.
Please stop.
Shut!
I'm monotonous.
Shut
All
up!
right. That's how it sounds when you guys don't stop talking, and I ask you to stop talking.
You know?
Sean, you shouldn't have said
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Monotonous call of the hoot owl. I could hear the stamping feet of our horses and the grinding, crunching noise made by their strong teeth as they ate the hard yellow kernels of corn in their feed boxes. A nighthawk screamed as he winged his way through the starlit night. An eerie screech from a tree close by made shivers run up and down my spine. It was a screech owl. I didn't like to hear the small owl, for there was a superstition in the mountains concerning them. It said that if you heard one owl, it meant nothing at all. But if you heard more than one, it meant bad luck.
How many does he hear?
Well, he's heard a screech owl and a hoot owl now. Yeah.
Okay, so since you just said that, I think it's kind of a little bit of foreshadowing right there. Because he's saying that, and he says that it's bad luck. And
All
he's
right.
going to this huge thing, so obviously it must have some kind of bad luck.
All right. Some kind of bad luck, because there's a superstition. If you hear more than one owl, it's bad luck. And now we know he's heard a hoot owl, a monotonous hoot owl, and he's heard a screeching screech owl. All right. He lay and listened to the eerie twittering sound. It was coming from the left of our camp. The creepy noise stopped, and for several moments there was silence. When next I heard the cry, it was coming from the right. I sat up in alarm. Had I heard two owls? My movement had awakened Grandpa. In a sleepy voice, he asked, "What's the matter? Can't you sleep? What are you sitting up like that for?" "Grandpa, I heard two screech owls," I said. Grunting and mumbling, he sat up. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he said, "You heard two screech owls? Why, that's nothing. I've heard two." "Oh, I see. You're thinking of the bad luck superstition. There's nothing to that, nothing at all. Now you lie down and go to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a big day."
That's really random.
That's pretty random.
Yeah.
Okay. I tried hard to fall asleep, but I couldn't. I couldn't get the owls out of my mind. Had I really heard
Check out
two?
old Dame Lillian.
Stop. Were we going to have bad luck? Surely nothing bad could happen, not on such a wonderful hunt. I found peace in my mind by telling myself that the owl had changed trees. Yes, that was it. He had simply flown out of one tree to another. The next morning, while having breakfast, Grandpa started kidding me about the screech owls. "I wish you could have caught one of those owls last night," he said. "We could have boiled him in our coffee pot. I've heard there's nothing like a strong hoot owl coffee." "It wasn't a hoot owl, Grandpa," I said. "It was a screech owl. I don't know for sure if I heard one or two. It could have been just one." Pointing to a small red oak, I said, "I think the first time I heard him, he was over there. The next time it was over in that direction. Maybe he changed trees. I sure hope so." Grandpa saw I was bothered. "You don't believe that hogwash superstition, do you? Bad luck, bah, there's nothing to it." Papa laughed and said, "These mountains are full of that jinx stuff. If a man believed it all, he'd go crazy." The encouraging words from Papa and Grandpa helped some, but there was still some doubt. It's hard for a young boy to completely forget things like that. Breakfast over and our gear stowed back in the buggy, we left Bluebird Creek. On that day, Grandpa drove a little faster than he had on the previous one. I was glad for this, for I was anxious to reach the campground. About noon, he stopped the team. I heard him ask Papa, "Is this Black Fox Hollow?" "No," Papa said, "this is Waterfall. Black Fox is the next one over. Why?" "Well," Grandpa said, "there's supposed to be a white flag in the mouth of Black Fox. That's where we leave the road. The camp is in the river bottoms." By this time, I was so excited, I stood up in the buggy box so I could get a better view. "Maybe you ought to step him up a little, Grandpa," I said. "It's getting pretty late." Papa joined in with his loud laughter. You just take it easy, he said. We'll get there in plenty of time. Besides, these mares can't fly. I saw the flag first. There it is, Grandpa, I shouted. Where? He asked. Over there, see, tied on that grapevine. As we left the main road, I heard Papa say, Boy, look at all those tracks. Sure has been a lot of traveling on this road. The smoke over there must be coming from the camps, Grandpa said. When we came inside of the camp, I couldn't believe what I saw. I stared in amazement. I had never seen so many people at one gathering. Tents were spread out over an acre and a half of ground, all colors, shapes, and sizes. There were odd-looking cars, buggies, wagons, and saddle horses. I heard Grandpa say almost in a whisper, I knew there'd be a lot of people here, but I never expected so many. I saw the astonished look on my father's face. Off to one side of the camp, under a large black gum tree, we set up our tent. I tied my dogs to the buggy and fixed a nice bed for them under it. After everything was taken care of, I asked if I could go look around the camp. Sure, Grandpa said, go any place you want to go, only don't get in anyone's way. I started walking through the large camp. Everyone was friendly. Once I heard a voice say, That's the boy who owns the 2 little red hounds. I've heard they're pretty good. If my head had gotten any bigger, I know it would have burst. I walked on as straight as a canebrake cane. I looked at the hounds. They were tied in pairs here and there. I had seen many coonhounds, but none that could equal these. There were red bones, blue ticks, walkers, and bloodhounds. I marveled at their beauty. All were spotlessly clean with slick and glossy coats. I saw the beautiful leather leashes and brass-studded collars. I thought of my dogs. They were tied with small cotton ropes and had collars made from old check-line leather. As I passed from one set of dogs to another, I couldn't help but wonder if I had a chance to win. I knew that in the veins of these hounds flowed the purest of breeded blood. No finer coonhounds could be found anywhere. They came from the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, the Bayou country of Louisiana, the Red River bottoms of Texas, and the Flinty Hills of the Ozarks. Walking back through the camp, I could feel the cold fingers of doubt squeezing my heart. One look at my dogs drove all doubt away. In the eyes of little Ann, it seemed I could read this message. Don't worry, just wait. We'll show them. Fiona.
To me, this kind of seems a little bit odd that they're saying, that's the boy who owns the coonhound. I feel that they're pretty good. When they should be talking about their dog. Why are they talking about his dog when they should be talking about their dog and giving their dog?
Because they're probably surprised.
All right. So Fiona's noticing that random people there from who knows where are noticing and have heard of Billy and his dogs. And instead of saying, oh, he's no match for us, they're like, ooh, I've heard he's pretty good. So how do you think they feel about Billy? How do you think the competition feels about Billy and his dogs?
That they're probably they might actually have a challenge.
They might actually have a challenge with Billy and his dogs. Zeke, what do you think?
In the beginning, like when he actually came, he said everyone was friendly. So it's not like they're going to be, if everyone's friendly, they're not going to be like smack talking.
Right. They're not smack talking. Everybody's being friendly. Nobody's being very mean or cutthroat about it. Okay. All right. That night, Grandpa said, tomorrow they'll have a contest for the best looking hound. Which one are you going to enter? I told him I didn't think I'd enter either one of my dogs. They were so little, I didn't think they had a chance. Grandpa got all huffed up. He said, it doesn't make any difference how little they are. They're coonhounds, aren't they? I asked him if he'd seen any of the other hounds. He said, yes, I've seen them all. Sure, they're big and good dogs too, but it makes no difference. I don't care if your dogs are no bigger than a snuff can. They'll still have a chance. Now, which one are you going to enter? I couldn't decide. I said, I'll think it over tonight and let you know tomorrow. The next morning, when I stepped outside the tent, I saw men everywhere. They were combing and brushing their dogs and getting them pruned up for the beauty contest. What does that mean, pruned? Kendall.
Ready?
Getting ready, like kind of grooming them. Do what?
What's the word?
Prune.
Yeah, so like when you prune bushes, you like you kind of like give them like you make them look nice and like there's no like overgrown.
Okay. Zeke remembered, like, it actually is a gardening word, is where you hear the word pruned more often, like you prune your bushes. So every year your bushes might grow, and so instead of looking like a nice round bush, there's like a little branch here or there sticking out. So if you prune your bush, you get it looking really nice and pretty and beautiful, like making sure it's not like all crazy and unruly looking. So yeah, they're making the dogs look good, cleaning them up, not just Okay, knocking the dirt off of them, like they're actually really giving them a good groom to make them look really pretty. Beautiful combs and brushes were used to brush expensive oils into their glossy hair. Going over to my dogs, I stood and looked at them. I started to untie old Dan, but taking a closer look at him, I could see he could never win a beauty contest. His face and ears were a mass of old scars caused from the many fights with tough old coons and bobcats. I held his head in my hands and felt sorry for him, but I loved him that much more. I looked little Ann over and couldn't see any scars. I laughed because I knew why. She was too smart to walk right up in the face of a fight. She'd wait until old Dan took hold and then dart in. I untied a rope and walked over to our tent. My father and grandfather were gone. No doubt they were over in some tent visiting old friends and making new ones. Looking around to find something I could use to groom my dog, I saw Grandpa's open suitcase. There, right on top, was the very thing I needed, his beautiful bone-handled hairbrush and his ivory comb. Picking them up, I turned them over and over in my hand. Little Ann stood looking at me. Impulsively, I reached down and raked her from shoulder to hip with the brush. She seemed to like it. I know I shouldn't do it, but I decided to use them. Knowing I had no oils, I got some butter from our grocery box. With the homemade butter and Grandpa's hair set, I brushed her until she shone. All the time I was grooming her, she tried to lick the butter from my hands. He totally just combed butter into his dog's hair.
Yep.
If you guys run out of like hair gel or product, are you guys going to stick butter
No.
in your
I'd
hair?
rather do that.
Well, go buy more or use
Now,
butter.
Why did he use the butter, though? Why do you think he used butter? What did it say that the other dogs looked like, and why do you think he used the butter, Kendall?
Glossy because butter, whenever you put it on something, it looks glossy.
Yeah, glossy. The key word there was glossy and shiny. They wanted their coat and their fur to look shiny. So smoothing the butter out really thin on it, it's going to make him look, because you think about oil kind of has a shine to it, and butter is basically just oil.
But what's gonna happen is that little Ann is gonna try to lick all the butter off.
Okay, so maybe little Ann's going to get so busy licking herself that she doesn't do
Wait.
well. We'll see.
She's gonna
Okay.
know.
Says she was trying to lick the butter from his hands. Josie.
Hopefully she doesn't look at
That means hurry for me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hopefully she doesn't lick her dirty fur.
All right, the job completed. I stepped back and inspected her. I was surprised at the change. Her short red hair glistened and everyone was in perfect place. Shaking my finger at her, I said, if you lay down and roll, I'll wear you out. Although I knew I wouldn't. Hearing a lot of movement outside, I looked out. Men were setting their dogs on a long table which had been built in the center of the campground. Leading little Ann to it, I picked her up and sat her on the table too. I told her to act like a lady. She wagged her tail as though she understood. I untied the rope and stepped back. After the dogs were all lined up, the judging started. 4 judges walked around and around the table, looking at them from all angles. When one of them would point at a hound, he was taken down and eliminated from the contest. Dog after dog was disqualified, but little Ann was still on the table. My eyes were wide, my throat dry, and my heart thumping. One judge stopped in front of little Ann. My heart stopped, too. Reaching over, he patted her on the head. Turning to me, he asked, is this your dog? I couldn't speak. I just nodded my head. He said, she's a beautiful hound. He walked on down the line. My heart started beating again. There were 8 dogs left. Little Ann was still holding her own. Then there were 4. I was ready to cry. 2 more were taken down. Little Ann and a big Walker hound owned by a Mr. Kyle were the only ones left. The judges couldn't seem to make up their minds. Sophie, what's a Walker hound? Let's look up what a Walker hound looks like. We want to know who little Ann's are.
Wow.
All right, let me share my
Wait,
screen.
type
Hang
in
on.
from Redford.
I'm so sorry, you guys are too loud. Sit.
Miss Red, can you
Sit.
type in from Redford Rose?
It's not gonna. All right, so that's a Walker hound. To me, it almost looks like a kind of a beagle type dog.
Wait, type in glisten.
All right,
Can you type in
probably something like this one because it's all standing really pretty and it's all groomed.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. So that's a Walker hound, and little Ann. It's just little Ann and the Walker hound. Everyone started shouting, "Walk them, walk them!" I didn't know what they meant. Mr. Kyle and I were told to go to one end of the table. Our dogs were placed at the other end. Mr. Kyle snapped his fingers and called to his dog. The big hound started walking toward his master. What a beautiful sight it was. He walked like a king. His body was stiff and straight, his head high in the air, his large muscles quivered and jerked under his glossy coat. But something went wrong. Just before he reached the end, he broke his stride, turned, and jumped down from the table. A low murmur ran through the crowd. It was my turn. 3 times I tried to call to little Ann. Words just wouldn't come out. My throat was too dry. The vocal cords refused to work, but I could snap my fingers. That was all I needed. She started towards me. I held my breath. There was silence all around me. As graceful as any queen, with her head high in the air and her long red tail arched in a perfect rainbow, my little dog walked down the table. With her warm gray eyes staring straight at me, on she came. Walking up to me, she laid her head on my shoulder. As I put my arms around her, the crowd exploded. During the commotion, I felt hands slapping me on the back and heard the words, "Congratulations," time after time. The head judge came over and made a speech, handed me a small silver cup. He said, "Congratulations, son. It was justly won." Wait a minute, says King.
I know what those cups are. They are the trophies.
Those cups are the trophies, Kane says. What? Well, little Ann just won a trophy.
But it didn't say if it was big or small.
It doesn't matter how big it is to him.
Doesn't matter.
He's still very smart.
Z.
Yeah, so, like, I think, well, maybe, I don't know, so, we know little Ann won the silver cup, so that's one of them, but, maybe old Dan will win the golden. Do you think have a golden cup in the beginning?
I don't know if it said what colors they were. I don't remember.
Yeah, but,
They were silver.
I think they were both silver.
yeah, so
One was
maybe
gold.
there's another kind, maybe they don't win the big hunt, but maybe there's another contest that he enters old Dan in.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe there's another kind of a contest that he'll enter old Dan in and get a cup for that. Fiona.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is like the big coon race. I'm thinking that like the first place one gets like the gold cup, and maybe the second place gets another silver cup, and then
Okay.
the third place might get like a bronze one.
All right.
I'm thinking maybe
Fiona's thinking it's like the Olympics. They got like a gold, silver, bronze cup for the coon, the actual
I'm thinking
championship.
that Old Dan and Little Dan might win that one and get the silver one.
Okay.
Gold.
All right, Mags. All right, guys, here we go. The tears came rolling. I gathered my dog up in my arms and walked to our tent. Grandpa followed, proudly carrying the cup. That evening, the head judge stepped up on the table. He had a small box in his hand. He shouted, "Oh, over here, man. I have some announcements to make." We all gathered round. In a loud voice, he said, "Gentlemen, the contest will start tonight. I'm sure most of you men have been in these hunts before, but for those of you who haven't, I'll explain the rules. Each night, 5 sets of dogs will be taken out to hunt. A judge will go along with each pair of hounds. Every morning, the judges will turn in that night's catch. The 2 hounds that tree the most coons will qualify for the championship runoff. The other 4 sets will be eliminated from the hunt. Of course, if there's a tie, both sets will qualify. On the following nights, only those hounds tying the first night's score or getting more will be in the runoff. Now, gentlemen, this hunt must be carried out in a sportsmanlike way. If the coon is treed where he can't be caught, such as in a bluff, it will not be counted. You must catch the coon, skin it, and turn the hide over to your judge. You are allowed to take an axe, a lantern, and a gun with birdshot, which you can use to get a coon out of a tree. 25 sets of hounds have been entered in the hunt. In this box, I have 25 cards. Everyone in the contest will now line up for the drawing. The card you draw will tell what night you and your hounds are to hunt. Fiona.
They have to bring a gun.
Okay, they're supposed to bring a gun, and we know they said little Ann is
No, they
gun
don't
shy.
have to bring a gun.
Well, they don't have to, but they are allowed to
And
bring a
remember,
gun.
Billy said like a couple chapters back. He said that he was gonna save up some coon skin and get himself a gun.
Mom said
But Mom
no.
said no. Billy wanted a gun. Mom said no, but Grandpa brought one, didn't he? Dad or Grandpa, I thought, brought one.
It was the axe.
They brought the axe. All right. Okay, so they've still got his trusty axe. Okay.
Trusty, it stabs someone.
Walking along in the line, I noticed the beautiful red coats, the caps, and the soft leather boots worn by the other hunters. I felt out of place in my faded blue overalls, old sheepskin coat, and scuffed and worn shoes, but to the wonderful men, it made no difference. They treated me like a man and even talked to me like a man. When it came my time to draw, my hand was shaking so hard I could hardly get it in the box. Pulling the card out, I saw I had drawn the 4th night. After the hunters had left, we stood around our campfire sipping strong black coffee and listening to the baying of the hounds. Time after time, we heard the tree bark. Once 2 hounds came close to the camp, hot on a trail. We listened to their steady bawling. All at once they stopped. After several minutes of waiting, the hunter said, "You know what? That old coon took to the river and in some ways fooled those dogs." Another one said, "Yes, sir, he sure has." A friendly hunter looked at me and asked, "Do you think he could have fooled your dogs?" Thinking his question over, I said, "Sometimes when I'm hunting away back in the mountains or down the river, I sing a little song I made up myself. One of the verses goes like this: You can swim the old river, old Mr. Ringtail, and play your tricks out one by one. It won't do any good, old Mr. Ringtail, 'cause my little land knows every one." The hunters roared with laughter. Some slapped me on the back. Tired and sleepy, but with a smile on my face, I went off to bed. The next morning, 2 blue tick hounds from the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee came out in the lead with 3 big coons to their credit. The other 4 sets were eliminated. The following morning, all 5 sets of dogs were eliminated. None had even tied the blue ticks, although 2 sets had gotten 2 coons, and one of those had treed a 3rd one in a bluff. That day, while eating dinner, my grandfather asked me if my dogs had ever treed 3 coons in one night. I said, "Yeah, 4 different times, but that's all." "Where do you think we should hunt on our night?" Papa asked. I told him if we could get our judge to go with us in the buggy, we would be better off if we could go far downriver and get out of the range where the other dogs had already hunted. He said, "That's a good idea. I'll go to see the judges about it." While I was washing the dishes, Grandpa said, "I think I'll shave." I should have left the tent then, but I wasn't done with my dishwashing. With a pin, Grandpa hung a small mirror on the tent wall. After much snorting, mumbling, and screwing of his face away and that way, the job was completed. Dabbing a little water on his iron gray hair, he reached for his brush and comb. From the corner of my eye, I watched him. I had tried to clean the beautiful brush, but hadn't been able to get all the short red hair from it. With 2 fingers, Grandpa pulled some of the hair from the bristles. Holding it in front of him, he looked it over carefully. Then, bending over close to the mirror, peeking over his glasses, he inspected his head. Straightening up, he looked at the brush again. Turning around quickly, he looked straight at me and said, "Say, young..." Not waiting for anything more, I scooted for the door. Crawling under the buggy, I lay down between my dogs. I knew he wouldn't be mad at me, but it'd be best to stay away for a while. Why does he think his grandpa would be upset with him? And he ran away. He used his comb, and what happened to it?
It got butter all over it.
It got butter on it, and what else?
Little Ann's hair.
All of little Ann's hair stuck all over it with butter, and then he combed his hair. So what does Grandpa's hair probably look like right now?
Dog hair.
Shiny.
Shiny? With little Ann hair sticking out of it? Smooth and glistening and glossy like little Ann.
At least,
All right.
he tried to clean it.
Hey, he tried to clean it. He did his best. Yeah, well, I don't know how much they brought with them. They're in a camp. They're camping. All right, the 3rd night, the blue ticks were tied by 2 black and tan hounds from the bayou country of Louisiana. All that day, I was restless. I prowled through the camp. Every little while, I'd go see how old Dan and little Ann were. Once I took 2 weenies from our groceries. I heated them and gave them to my dogs for a treat. Old Dan swallowed his down in one gulp and looked as if me to say, "Is that all?" Little Ann ate hers in a ladylike way. I could have sworn I saw a small grin on her face. Grandpa was hopping around like a grasshopper, going here and there. Once passing a tent, I heard his voice. I knew he was bragging about my dogs, and I smiled to myself. Another hunter stopped me and asked, "Is it true that your hounds have treed 6 coons in one night, 3 up in one tree, or is that old man just blowing off steam?" I told him my grandfather had a little steam, but he was the best grandpa a boy ever had. He patted me on the head, turned, and walked away laughing. All right.
Can we read the next chapter?
Where's his dad? I wish he could. Dad.
Tomorrow, it's Billy's night to hunt.
Well, a loud roar happens.
Today, you have a quiz on these chapters that we've read the past 5 days. Now, listen carefully. You do not need to do the questions that go with today's chapter. So you guys, virtual guys, you don't have to do the questions for the chapter. You only need to take today's quiz. Okay. So I'm going to hit stop record. You guys are good to go so you can work on your quiz before we have math. And I will see you in a little bit. Bye. No, I'll pass them out into the test.